Okay, trasmetti, we are going on live. Yeah, we are live now.
Hello, good.
Hello, I warmly welcome you to our 55th webinar or 55th webinar by the Academy of Space Renaissance International. On this 22nd of January, I'm really delighted that you have come to join us. We have people watching from Tampa in Florida, Asheville, from DC, from Dublin, Ireland, from Taos City in California. And my name is Sabine Heinz, and I'm the person responsible for our webinar series and one of the vice presidents of Space Renaissance International, and also responsible for our art chapter. Our today's special guest is Frank White. He will talk about the urgency of large-scale space migration. Hello, Frank. We are really happy that you have come to join us and that you will come to lecture with us. Hello, Frank.
Hello, glad to be here. Thank you so much.
And I also would like to welcome Bernard Foying. Professor Bernard Foying is our president. And hello, Bernard.
Hello, yes, so best wishes from Space Renaissance International. So since our end of year celebration seminar, many things have happened. We entered in a new year. We are going towards a new international lunar year as well, not only on the 10th of February, but also with many events, launches, landing, attempted landing. But also, your president has been traveling in Asia last month, but this month we have been also quite active in Europe. So we had some TV interview at the French Senate in the beginning of January. We went in Toulouse. And last week, we had also a very interesting event at ESTEC, European Space Agency Research and Technology Center, called Space for Inspiration, where we discussed and also we found many collaborators, stakeholders working how to make it happen. And I think this Space for Inspiration goes well in line with what Frank White inspired us to work on with also his overview effect inspiration, but also his call for general migration beyond our Earth, so in a multi-planetary civilization. So it's a great pleasure to have with us Frank White and my good friend and colleagues also from Space Renaissance, Sabine and Adriano.
Thank you, Bernard. And I also would like to welcome Adriano Ottino. He is also some of our vice presidents and former president and one of the founders of SRI. Hello, Bernard. Adriano.
Thank you. Thank you for being. Yes, we initiated our 2024 webinars, and we have a full calendar up to June. And we will have Alberto Cavallo, we will have Giulio Prisco, Armen Papazian, Luigina Ferretti, and many others. So we continue with this very, I think, useful cultural engagement to discuss about space, about civilian space development, the expansion of civilization into space, and discussing all the aspects, scientific, philosophical, and technical, and legal, and everything, 360 degrees about expanding into space. So we're very happy today to have Frank White with us. Frank White is a partner of the 18 SDG initiative also. And he will give a very, very interesting lecture today. Okay, so I don't want to catch more time
Okay.
to the presentation.
Thank you, Adriano. Frank, before I leave you the floor, I would like to introduce you to our audience. Frank White is a professor at the Space University and has authored or co-authored numerous books on topics ranging from space exploration to climate change to artificial intelligence. His best-known work, The Overview Effect, Space Exploration and Human Evolution, is considered by many to be a seminal work in the field of space exploration. A film called Overview, based largely on his work, has had more than 8 million. Here's an echo in the background. Here's an echo in the background. A film Overview, based largely on his work, has had more than 8 million plays on Vimeo. Frank White considers himself to be a space philosopher and has long advocated developing a new philosophy of space exploration. His book on this topic, The Cosma Hypothesis, Implications of the Overview Effect, asks the fundamental questions. What is the purpose of human space exploration? Why has the evolutionary process brought humanity to the brink of becoming a spacefaring species? In the book, he shares the idea of the human space program as a central project that will engage all of us in the process of becoming citizens of the universe. Frank, the stage is yours. You may share your screen and start your show.
Okay, thank you so much, Sabine. Adriano, Bernard, let me get my screen shared here. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes,
You
but
are.
still not full
Yes.
screen.
I'll get it to a full screen and off we go.
Yes, perfect.
Excellent.
Okay, so
Okay.
my topic is the urgency of large-scale space migration. A lot of words in there that people might react against, like urgency, large-scale migration, and space. I guess everything in the title could be something people could find challenging. And I'm really going to share one possible future. I'm not saying it's the only one, but it's one that I'm really concluding may be necessary. It may be the necessary future. I also want to thank my colleagues at the Human Space Program who are helping me put together our mission, which is for a sustainable, ethical, and inclusive evolution into the solar ecosystem. Okay, just to get started, whenever I give a talk or have a podcast, the person interviewing me usually says, well, Frank, how did you get interested in space exploration? And I say, well, I can't promise you this is true, but my cousin, Ann Howard, my first cousin, tells me it started when I was 5 years old. And she and I are like brother and sister. We lived together with our grandparents and our mothers during World War II when our fathers were off in the military. After that, we stayed close. And at one point, she tells me that we were sitting in the car while our mothers were in the grocery store. And supposedly, I turned to her at one point and I said, Anne, you know we're going to have to leave this planet someday, don't you? Planets don't last forever, and we're going to have to go elsewhere. I can't confirm nor deny that I ever said that, but it's kind of interesting because I'm giving you the same message today that I gave my cousin at the age of 5. I'm convinced that we have to leave planet Earth, not just for ourselves, but for the Earth. So let me tell you, I've got 3 basic points to make. And they break down into the challenge, the response, and the solution. The challenge is overshoot. Overshoot refers to going beyond the carrying capacity of our planet to support human beings, and even more than just the number of people, though there are a lot of us. It's also this very technological civilization that we've built. And the question is, have we gone into an overshoot mode? And that really does link to human evolution. And when I wrote the first edition of the Overview Effect in 1987, nearly 40 years ago, the subtitle was Space Exploration and Human Evolution. And I was mostly interested in space exploration, but over time, I've become more and more interested in human evolution and evolution in general. And so I'm going to talk a lot about evolution today. And the thing is, when you talk about evolution, you have to talk about extinction. Just as when you talk about life, you have to talk about death. And extinction is the death of a species. In preparing for my talk to you today, I was really somewhat surprised that since the Earth emerged 4.5 billion years ago, or as I like to say, 4.5 billion orbits ago, there have been 5 billion species on planet Earth, and 99% have gone extinct. So extinction is really more common than anything else. I also checked out the fact that many of you may know this. There have been 8 other hominid species other than Homo sapiens. They're extinct. The one we probably know best is Homo neanderthalis. And contrary to the old caveman view that we used to have, it seems that Neanderthalis was pretty intelligent, they had a culture, and that they actually interacted and interbred with Homo sapiens quite a bit. We don't know why they went extinct. However, many people on Earth today, Homo sapiens, have Homo neanderthalis genes. I do, and they're pretty expressive in me, in that I found out if you're a morning person, you probably have those genes. I don't know what the connection is, but scientifically, there's something called the Viking disease or Dupuytren's contracture. You can't see it, but my doctor told me I've got it. It's a condition in your hands where eventually your fingers start to contract. And it's called the Viking disease because it's almost totally something that is connected to Northern European ancestry, which was a stronghold of the Neanderthals. And so there are a lot of indications of our past, and yet these are genes of extinct ancestors. When I found this out, I made the mistake of telling it to a class I teach at Harvard Extension School. And one of the students said, "We need a new teacher. We need a new teacher." Well, this is just an old-fashioned bias, I think, against Neanderthalis. And we really ought to get over it, because they were actually a pretty impressive group. But they're gone. They're gone. And that's the message. Now, why are you talking about extinction, Frank? That can't happen to us. Well, I did some more research and I'm still working on this one, but you may have seen a story that at a certain point in our ancestry, we were down to 1,280 breeding pairs. There was what was called a bottleneck that occurred when we did almost go extinct, our ancestors did. And the confusing thing that I'm looking into, I've seen different numbers about when this happened, 70,000 years ago, 800,000 years ago. Was it 2 bottlenecks or 1? I can't tell you, but it's pretty well known now scientifically that our ancestors came very close to extinction. Now, I'm going to just say it. I don't think we're going to become extinct. I think we're resilient. I think we're intelligent. And I think we're going to evolve. And I think part of the evolution is leaving planet Earth. However, there is something more to this story. And that's this idea that the Earth is the best planet. Jeff Bezos says this a lot. Jeff talks a lot about we leave the planet to help the planet. And he says we shouldn't abandon the planet. And he's right. I totally agree with him on that. But we need to understand, I did co-author a book on climate change. The current 10,000 years of climate are unique, mild, stable. It's allowed new civilizations to arise. It's allowed the civilization and the level of population we have today to exist. However, there's a great series on cable called Life on Our Planet, narrated by Morgan Freeman. And what you see there is this planet has gone through a lot of change. And the way it is today is not the way it's always been. There have been 5 major extinctions, mass extinctions, during our existence as a planet. 5. And one of them that we're familiar with is the dinosaurs. You know, there's an old joke that if the dinosaurs had a space program, they'd still be around. And that's true. And kind of they did have a space program because they discovered flight. And the dinosaurs that went extinct were the land-based dinosaurs. And the dinosaurs that survived were the aerial dinosaurs. And I think you know they became birds. And so we have dinosaurs all over the planet today, living dinosaurs. They evolved. They didn't become extinct. And the asteroid impact was 65 million years ago. That really wiped out almost all of life on Earth, but not all. And this is really chronicled in this Life on Our Planet. Well, so what does all of this mean? Well, I just want to point out one other thing about the volatility of planet Earth, and that is there was a period called the Younger Dryas, and that took place between 11,600 and 12,900 orbits in the past. And that was cataclysmic. That was a huge change, climate change, basically. And that's not so long ago. I mean, that's not 65 million years ago, that's thousands of years ago. I'm just trying to communicate to you that what we've got today on planet Earth is rare and wonderful. And one other thing I want to tell you, the book I co-authored on climate change was with a climate change expert, Paul Majewski. who had led an expedition to pull about 100,000 years of ice cores out of the Greenland ice sheet. And one thing they found is that rapid climate change events, which Paul and I called Rickies, those can happen in 5 to 10 years. Climate change doesn't have to take 100 years, doesn't have to take 1,000 years. It can happen very, very quickly. And the biggest issue, which I don't hear anybody talking about, is for us, the question is not either or. Is it a natural climate change cycle or something caused by humans? That is not really the problem. There are natural cycles where you can go from an ice age to a very warm planet in a very short period of time. We know that happened. You look at the ice cores, that happened before we were driving cars and doing all the stuff we're doing. What would really be terrible, and it hasn't quite happened yet, is if what we're doing is in line with what the natural cycle is doing. If we're warming the planet at a time when the planet is going into a warming cycle, that's what we need to worry about. But that could be extremely difficult for us, as smart as we are and as resilient as we are. Well, that takes me to the concept of limits of growth. I'm old enough to remember something that was done back in the late 60s and early 70s, which is a group called the Club of Rome commissioned a series of computer simulations at MIT in Boston, well, in Cambridge. And what they wanted to know was, given certain parameters or variables like population, land use, pollution, etc., what would happen if there were unrestrained growth of our civilization? And they ran a number of scenarios, and it's important to know they weren't predicting anything, but most of their scenarios ended up in overshoot. Remember that word? Overshoot and collapse. Not collapse of the planet, collapse of our civilization. And so there was a lot of debate about this and a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of, conflict about it. But then some of the people involved wrote an update 30 years later in 2004. And instead of saying we might go into overshoot, they said we're in overshoot. Overshoot means what? Going beyond the carrying capacity of the Earth to support us, right? So in their minds, we're in overshoot now and have been for some time. I've, again, been doing research on this, and there's a website that says that human population cannot continue to grow indefinitely. And it talks about our ecological footprint, and it says it would take 1.75 Earths to sustain our current population. And by 2050, we will need 3 Earths. So we're short in terms of how much capacity we have. And there's another book called A Planet of 3 Billion by a geographer who's done a lot of complicated work I can't get into, but he says the ideal population for planet Earth is 3 billion people. Well, we've got 8, we're projected to go to 10. Can we do a lot to fix it? without going into outer space? Yes. We should do everything we can to fix it without going into the solar system. It's not either or. It's all hands on deck. And really, you know, we have this idea of environmentalists versus space people, and that's a false dichotomy. We're all environmentalists. We all love the earth. We want it to be as beautiful and wonderful as it is today. But there are some environmentalists who are focusing on the earth, and they should. And then there are some of us who are focusing on a larger ecosystem, the solar system. And Earth is simply part of that. So there need not be a contradiction here. So there is a different scenario to extinction. It might be called social extinction. And that would be that our civilization, as we now maintain it, could not be continued in the current state. I don't know how close we are to that. But, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit later about the fact that there seems to be more fear of that than there was in the past, and more willingness to consider that it may happen. And so we really need to ponder what we do about this. And back in the 70s, when Limits to Growth was published, Gerard K. O'Neill, whom some of you may know, read the book or became aware of it, and he realized that the model they were using didn't include the dimension of space. And that was when O'Neill came up with the idea of large space communities made out of asteroidal material and very light footprint on other planets, etc. And his vision is still alive. I mean, Jeff Bezos very openly talks about it, and I do too. I think it is a positive vision for the future, an inspiring vision for the future, and it also has the double benefit that it could help the Earth for us to begin to move off, reduce the population, reduce the level of energy that's being expended here. And, you know, it's, again, you're going to hear me saying it many times today. It's not abandoning the Earth, it's leaving for the benefit of the Earth. As far as the collapse of civilization, I don't know if you've heard of the Silurian hypothesis, but it's kind of an interesting idea. It's really a thought experiment that was put together by two astrophysicists, Adam Frank at the University of Rochester and Gavin Schmidt at NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies. They started out thinking about, you know, what if there was an advanced civilization like ours 100,000 years ago? How would we know that it was there? Or even if there are people on Earth 100,000 years from now, how would they detect our civilization? What would last? And they've come up with the Silurian hypothesis, which is named after an episode in Doctor Who, in which there was a previous civilization, the Silurians, and Doctor Who discovers them. And of course, that's science fiction, and the hypothesis is really a thought experiment. But many people now are looking at, is there anything detectable that would show us there was such a civilization? I went to DALL-E 3. I don't know if I made it clear to you, but all of my illustrations really are coming from DALL-E 3. And I asked DALL-E 3 to produce an image of a Silurian, and this is what I got. I do find it intriguing. Once again, when we think about the overview effect of time of 4.5 billion orbits, a lot could happen during that time. I am not saying there were civilizations that existed that we've forgotten about. I'm saying, though, there's enough time in which that might have occurred. And this brings us to Homo sapiens versus Homo spaciens. We are not the end of evolution, and we could be a midpoint. And the most logical evolutionary step to take would be obviously off the planet. And when I was writing the overview effect, I learned about speciation from Peter Diamandis, whom many of you may know. It happens all the time on Earth where a small body of individuals gets isolated from the main gene pool. They're subjected to unexpected conditions, and mutations can take hold, whereas it's hard for them to take hold in the larger gene pool. Peter pointed out to me that outer space is a very ripe area for different species to arrive. There's a lot of radiation, there's different gravity, there are many, many different conditions. And either by choosing to enhance ourselves and change ourselves to become more adapted to that environment, or through natural evolutionary processes, our descendants could look very different from us, and just as our ancestors did. So what I'm trying to say is that the arrival of Homo sapiens shouldn't be seen as some far out science fiction. It could be a very natural outcome of space migration. It could be a positive outcome as well. All right. So I hope what I've communicated is that we're not living in a stable situation that will go on forever. Just like I said at the age of 5, planets don't last forever. And so we ought to begin thinking about a plan B. And that's what I want to talk about now. And I think the first step is the overview effect, that transformation of consciousness that happens when you see the Earth from a distance. And it's very clear, astronauts, they both see the Earth, but they see the universe simultaneously. They become more environmentally conscious. They become more interested in collaboration and cooperation. They see that there are no borders or boundaries on the planet, and they use the term fragility a lot. I mean, sometimes they mean the Earth is fragile, but sometimes I think they mean we are. Our existence is fragile. And so the overview effect has this dual impact. Some astronauts have told me that they felt very comfortable out there. They felt very comfortable moving out beyond the Earth, and they felt drawn to it. They couldn't say why. And yet, of course, they also felt greater love for the Earth. Therefore, I do believe the overview effect can help us in every way. I mean, it can help people to become more inspired to be earthbound environmentalists, but also more inspired to be spacefaring environmentalists. It's not just an idea, the overview effect. It's an experience, and I want to just let some astronauts share what that experience is like, because I want you to feel the change in awareness and consciousness and identity and how profound that could be in propelling us outward, as well as taking care of the home world. This is Tracy Caldwell Dyson. She is an active astronaut even today. I interviewed her in 2019 at Johnson Space Center, and I asked her if her experience gave her a sense of human purpose. What are we here for? And here's what she told me.
Did it give you a sense of purpose, not just for you, but for us humans?
Maybe it's semantics, but rather than a purpose, we had a responsibility.
Okay.
And one of the great responsibilities I think we have is to protect it. Like I said, you know, we've got a little baby that's trusting us with everything. And it's, you know, you know, you can really stretch that metaphor that this baby is so full of potential. This baby is going to grow.
Yeah.
And it's going to take care of us someday. We've got to do everything we can to make sure that it has what it needs to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the Earth from that vantage point, I know others have said this, you don't see the borders. You don't see political borders. You hardly see geographical borders. You know, you just have this sense of, I don't want this to go away, and I don't want to be the only one to see this. Because as I said, I grieved over how I was going to tell people about this, to bring home what I was feeling. In fact, I think my first experience looking at all of that was again on the shuttle flight. And I remember at one point, my vision became blurry, and I panicked a little bit. Like, what's going? I want to see that it's going to go away, and rubbed my eyes. And I discovered I was actually tearing up. And in microgravity, right, the way fluid behaves, it just balls up on your eyes. That was the emotional response I was having unknowingly. I just was, feeling something as I was staring at this view of the whole thing. And it moved me to tears unknowingly.
People think astronauts don't cry, but they do. And often they cry when they see the Earth from orbit. Moving on, I want to apologize for my dog, Maisie Dobbs. She is guarding the house, and I will do my best to keep her out of the meeting, but it's difficult. Sarah Sabri is a Space for Humanity citizen astronaut, the first person from Egypt to experience the overview effect on the Blue Origin flight. She makes a tremendously important point as we consider large-scale space migration, and that is there's really no distinction that's meaningful between Earth and space. As I've said many, many times, we are in space. We've always been in space, and we always will be in space.
Is there any way to summarize briefly what you think changed?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the biggest things for me was the lack of separation between Earth and space. And because we've always used the terms space and Earth kind of separate from each other. And we always thought, okay, we're doing things on Earth here, and then like there are certain things that are going to be done for space. But for me, when I was up there, I realized that there's no actual separation between the two. The Earth is just a continuation of it, and we're just a part of this much bigger thing. And that to me, when that clicked, it just like was, oh, like it makes sense why we're doing what we're doing. It makes sense for us to need to explore it. It makes sense for us to need to understand more of it, because it is us. We are it. And that was the biggest thing for me. And I think I was more on the side of looking towards the outside. Like I felt this connection between Earth and space more than anything. It just felt so part of one another that it was so hard. It's so hard for me to separate the two now. It's just, I think that was the most overwhelming feeling that I felt from this whole experience.
You know, in the case of what she is saying, I've thought of it often as, let's say you're on an ocean liner and somebody says, "Are you on a ship or are you on the ocean? Well, it's not a meaningful question. Yes, you're on a ship, but you're also on the ocean. So we're on a spaceship called Earth. Are you in space? Yes, you are in space. And just as with the ocean liner, you can get off of the ship and get more engaged with the ocean, and we can get off of our planet, get more engaged with what we call space. But the dichotomy we have between the two really blinds us to possibility. Dylan Taylor is a Blue Origin astronaut. He's chairman and CEO of Voyager Space. Full disclosure, he's my publisher, he's a friend, he's a benefactor. He flew on Blue Origin, and I was privileged to interview him very shortly after his flight.
You know, everyone's describing the same thing, but they're describing it in a different way with their own context, with their own, but it's all different versions of the truth, right? And that's the other thing. You know, I saw Scott Parazynski after the flight, and he looked into my eyes, and we had this connection. And I know Scott pretty well, but I think he could tell, you know, he could tell I had been transformed, and he kind of had that look in his eye, like, okay, I know where you are right now. And it was a weird, you know, it's almost like you're in a foreign country and you run into someone who speaks your language, and it's like all of a sudden you have that connection because you have that bond that you just other people don't have, because they just don't quite have the full picture. And I know now why it's so transformational, because it is so unique. It's just, yeah, it's really powerful. And this whole notion of, can you experience the overview effect on suborbital? I'm here to tell you, yes, 100% yes.
You know, when you listen to people who've flown and you think about the idea of Homo Spacians, it's almost like they're very close to being Homo Spacians psychologically already. And I'm going to close with Jean-Francois Clairvoy, an ESA and NASA astronaut. Because of the editing, you'll see me first, but very quickly, Jean-Francois will appear. And I think he'll sum up the overview effect very nicely in one word.
Imagine the Earth, it is small, I mean, small like this, it is limited. It is on the background of the black sky. And there is nothing else than the sun and the moon around, nothing else. And you love it. You know, you develop a feel of love, like you love your partner, you love your kids. You love the planet. It's not only awe, admiration. It's not only feeling the sense of a creator somewhere, because it's too beautiful to be just by chance. Mm-hmm. I felt love for Earth. It was very strong. And I think it's maybe more the feel of love than the beauty that made me cry and feel my eyes, you know, wet by tears.
Yeah. So we opened that sequence with an astronaut who cried, and we closed it with an astronaut who cried at seeing the Earth from orbit. Loving the Earth, that's a really important idea. That's the urgent message of the overview effect, but will it lead to urgent action? That's the question of the solution of large-scale space migration. You could also talk about it as sustainable space migration, but migration is the key that I want to talk about here in our final conversation. One thing that concerns me a lot right now is that we are missing an opportunity. And again, I asked DALL-E 3 to create an image That's supposed to be a starship taking off. And that's a very profound thing to have happen. And yet I worry a lot. Certainly, there's nothing wrong with taking a vacation, going to the beach. I'm not condemning it, but are we too focused on earthbound issues to see the big picture? And is that going to make us miss an opportunity? Well, there was one person back in the 1960s who really seized the opportunity, and that was John F. Kennedy. And in 1962, he gave a speech at Rice University. For the interest of time, I'm not going to play that speech or excerpts from it. But in 1962, he talked about going to the moon. And he used an important term. We choose to go to the moon. And that's where we are today. We can choose to leave the planet and create a new civilization and become a spacefaring civilization, or we can choose not to. We can choose to have a large-scale migration or a very small migration. We have choices. And that's the important issue right now. What choices are we going to make? And he said something else, and he said it in his Boston accent, and I live outside of Boston, so I hear it all the time. And he said, we choose to go to the moon and do these other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Yes, a politician challenging us to do hard things. Putting together the resources to realize the vision of large numbers of humans living and working off the planet, it will be hard. But we can do hard things. And we should, if we want to ensure our evolution and our survival. The worst that can happen is that apocalyptic futures will not occur, and yet we will move into a much larger ecosystem and create a new kind of civilization. So another part of the Kennedy speech was why? Why go? And that question is still asked of us today. And of course, other people have said it. You know, we are the only group that is constantly asked why we should do what we do when there are so many problems on the earth. You know, people don't say, why are you playing a round of golf when there are so many problems on earth? Or why are you going to Disney World when there are so many problems on earth? But they ask us, why are we doing it? And the answer is, we can say very openly, it's for the earth. It's for ourselves. It's for the survival of our species. But it can help the earth, as I said before. If we're really in overshoot, if we could get closer to a planet of 3 billion, not through controlling people and being authoritarian and having a one-child policy and things like that, well, that's a good reason to go, isn't it? And there are other reasons, of course. Inspiration was mentioned earlier by Bernard, and the overview effect itself is a reason to go. But, you know, I think most people in the space community are saying, we want to do it for our beautiful planet. We want to help our planet. I call it the kid in the basement syndrome. Yeah, you know, here's a kid living in his mom's basement. You know, your mom loves you. likes having you around, but it's getting a little heavy. I mean, she's getting a little older. She'd like for you to find a job and go out and realize your destiny. She won't love you any less, and you won't love her any less. But you'll give her a break and maybe an opportunity to do something different with that basement. And I feel like that's how Mother Earth feels right now. I love you. You're one of the most impressive species that I've ever seen. But, maybe it's time. Maybe 5-year-old Frank was right. Planets don't last forever. The other point I want to make is let's not make a big deal of migration. It's natural. It's inevitable. It can be simple. Like I see this picture on the left and I imagine that one of the parents got a new job in another city and they're moving for a better life. The other picture is more gloomy. That looks to me like people migrating because they have to. Maybe there's a war. Maybe there's climate change. But humans have been migrating for years, I mean, millennia, out of Africa until we were all over the planet. And so migration into the solar ecosystem, yes, it'll be different. It'll be hard. But we can do hard things when we think we should. I won't play this because of copyright reasons, but I do suggest you listen to Jeff Bezos talking to Lex Friedman about this issue. He makes the point, this is the good planet, this is the best planet, but he makes a very simple point. He says, what has made life better for humans is energy use per capita. And he makes the point that in general, life has gotten better in every way except for the natural world in the last 500 years. And that's because of energy usage. And he says, I don't know when it will happen or what the schedule should be, but it's inevitable that we're going to migrate, we're going to leave. I only disagree with him on one issue. I think it should be sooner rather than later, just to make sure we make it. The question of how many people leave and how soon is critical. Elon Musk says he wants to put 1 million people on Mars, and that sounds pretty impressive. But you know what? That's not going to help the overshoot problem, not when we have 8 billion people here. So the number of people who become spacefaring is very important to the future of Earth, and how soon it happens becomes very important. Once again, I've pictured dinosaurs becoming very intelligent and having their own civilization, and a lot more was destroyed when that meteor hit than we know. And, I've pictured 2 dinosaurs talking about creating a space program, and one dinosaur saying, life here is pretty good. I don't think we have to rush it. The other dinosaur says, no, we got to go soon. And the next day, the meteor hits. That's just fantasy, of course, but we never know. We never know. It could be a meteor, it could be an asteroid, it could be a rapid climate change event. And we might not become extinct, but we might be thrown so far back that it would take millennia for humanity to recover. This is not science that I'm giving you, it's a hunch. It's a hunch that we need to think about this very seriously, very, very soon. I think popular culture knows what we're talking about. Popular culture brings out what Jung called the collective unconscious. Things we know, but we can't prove. And we don't want to say it out loud if we're an academic because we don't have data. But I believe the collective unconscious of humanity knows that there's danger ahead. And believe it or not, when I was at Oxford in graduate school, that was 50 years ago, I wrote a post-apocalyptic novel. It's called American Revolution. You can read it. It's on Amazon. I wrote that many, many years ago. And I didn't even know the word post-apocalyptic novel. But now, think about it. How many post-apocalyptic novels are there? How many TV series? The Walking Dead, et cetera, et cetera. The Last of Us. It's become a genre. Well, how many space-related series have you seen? The Expanse, For All Mankind. What I'm talking about here is the apocalypse versus space. It's there. And there's a new film called The ISS. I haven't seen it. I've heard good reviews and bad reviews. But you know, it's interesting. The plot brings together everything we're talking about. It's about a group of astronauts and cosmonauts on the ISS, and they talk about we're together and no borders and boundaries and all of that. And then nuclear war breaks out on the Earth. The United States tells the astronauts to take over the ISS. Russia tells the cosmonauts to take over the ISS. All this beautiful unity is shattered by what's happening on Earth. That's a very interesting film in that it unites two of the themes we're talking about today. Doesn't matter if it's a good film or a bad film. Whoever wrote it was picking up on what we're discussing. Let's just remember, as I said before, the Earth is not alone. As Sarah Sabri said, the distinction between Earth and space became meaningless to her. And there is an ecosystem out there that's waiting for us. Nothing is preventing us from moving out into a larger ecosystem. And I also think people who are afraid we're going to go trash other planets haven't thought about the overview effect, because I think everyone who goes out will experience the overview effect and will have a higher level of ecological consciousness. They really will. Okay, shameless plug. My nonprofit, I co-founded the Human Space Program. I wrote about it in the book. Nobody else seemed to want to create a human space program that would be global in scope. And so we're a nonprofit that is doing all we can to shape the evolution of humanity into this new ecosystem. One of the most exciting things we're doing is we're taking the computer model that was created under the auspices of the Club of Rome back at MIT, and we are adding the space dimension. And we're creating a model, a simulation that we really hope that we can have people like Blue Origin and the Sierra Club coming together to build this model, help us with the data, the assumptions, the variables. And it won't be a model to advocate any particular scenario. Maybe it'll show that the kind of space migration I'm talking about really will take a long time. Maybe it'll show us ways that we can help the planet with minimum migration. But the point of it is, we're going to build on what was done before. And the exciting thing to me is we actually have 2 people who worked on that original model working on ours. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the work that Adriano and his team are doing. And they brought together more than 70 space-related organizations to make sure that the space environment is part of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think we all believe the goals can't be reached without the space dimension. The human space program is supporting it. But there's no need for despair. I mean, there are a lot of us are working toward a positive future, and I hope all of you are hopeful. So, you know, there was a political campaign in the United States a few years ago asking, can we make life better? I can't remember what the question was, but the answer was, yes, we can. And I believe that we can make large-scale space migration happen in a good way. I also think we must. Yes, we must. My final point, we have to flip the script. Outside of our bubble that we live in of space advocacy, the idea of leaving the planet is abandoning the planet, leaving it behind because you don't want to deal with its problems. We need to flip that script. Leaving is not abandoning. Leaving the Earth can be and is an act of love. This presentation is dedicated to the co-founder of the Human Space Program, Ted Field. Thank you, Ted, for all that you did. Ted passed away recently, and his memorial service is actually today. It's going to be a long project, going to be a big project, and we're always going to keep in our memory those who have contributed to it. So, thanks to everyone, and I believe, although I always go over time, I think we have time for a discussion, Q&A, or I can talk some more if you prefer. Thanks very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for your interesting lecture. I was listening, and not only me, we had people watching from the United States, from Ireland, from Belgium, from France, from Serbia, from UK, so from many, many countries. And yeah, it was really, really interesting. And you mentioned the overview effect. And last year, no, 2 years ago, I was in Paris at the ISC Congress, and the Dutch astronaut, what's his name? Andrew Kuiper, yeah, Andrew Kuiper. Started an initiative to give this overview effect to as much people as possible. And he developed a space bus, and he's going to schools with this virtual reality headset, and it was really, really, really interesting. I was one of the lucky persons who could enter the bus and flew from Earth in direction and flew over the moon, and it was really, really impressive. And I can imagine if you are really in a starship, that is, makes a great impact, and all people, all astronauts, cosmonauts, taikonauts, or what their name is, have mentioned this, and they're quite impressed. And yeah, I think we and as you mentioned, Earth is part of space, so yeah, we should go into space. But also you mentioned the impact or the influence what the conditions on Earth have, for example, at a space station. And I remember Sergei Krikalev was at the Mir space station when the wall came down, and his crew has, also his co-workers had returned to Earth, and he was alone, waiting for the other workers to come back. But the wall came down, and he was in space some days, many days without contact to Earth. So, and after some days, he got a radio signal and some contact, and they told him the wall came down, and he was like forgotten in space. He was 10 months all alone at the Mir space station until he was brought back to Earth. And yeah, so it was really, really, so it impressed me how he survived, but he was severely damaged. Yeah, because if you're
Right.
10 so long time alone, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the thing is, the International Space Station is remarkable, and it may not get enough credit for what a remarkable accomplishment of humanity it really is. It's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize many times, and I've always written in saying it should get the Nobel Peace Prize. And it's unfortunate that we're going to lose it. Now, I know there are going to be new commercial space stations created. China has its own space station. We will have space stations, but I don't know if we'll ever have anything quite like the ISS. And it's continued in spite of so many issues and problems. Your mention of Andre Kuiper's, I was in touch with the people who put that together before it was ever really created. And I think it's wonderful. And it's part of a movement that the human space program is really engaged in, which is bring the overview effect down to Earth. Use virtual reality, which is an amazing tool, to give people that feeling, that impression of what it's like. I've had some virtual reality experiences, including I did go on the space bus, incidentally. And yeah, I mean, we don't have to put everybody in orbit. Not everybody has to go migrate off the planet to have the overview effect experience, but I really think the more people who have it, the better for planet Earth, because
Yes.
they will be more collaborative, more environmentally aware. The astronauts tend to identify with the whole Earth, not the individual countries. A lot of things happen with the overview effect that are extremely beneficial for Earth.
Yes, and all are saying that they recognize the fragility of Earth, and yeah, it's really, really an important thing.
Yeah.
And the countries are not described, so you see not borders.
Oh.
And in former time, and I give you right, migration has taken place. Has always taken place since humankind exists, and even animals migrating from one place to the other, and with the herds, and yeah. I have a question from the chat. Oops, there's a question. Are you interested in space solar power?
What was the space or what?
Solar power.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think let's just imagine that and I do want to say Adriano's written about this. He has a great book about this. It's not just me. Other people like Adriano have had the same basic concept. So one thing that we think about is if we were to imagine a commitment of planet Earth as a whole to large-scale space migration, part of what could be done that would bring a benefit to the Earth right away is to begin space-based solar power. again, the whole point that Jeff Bezos makes in his interview is that energy usage is key. And if we could have energy from outer space beamed to the Earth safely, it would be a game changer. And I'm so happy. I started hearing about this back in the 70s, and I couldn't figure out why we weren't going all in on space-based solar power. And now I think there is a lot of interest and people are beginning to see the point. So my idea is one of the ways to really fund the moving outward would be people could essentially be part of building space-based solar power systems. And I believe it fits nicely into the whole evolution out into the solar ecosystem.
Bernard, do you have some question? I know you have some question, I'm quite sure.
Okay, so thank you very much, Frank, for this thoughtful and inspiring talk. Coming to the overview, I believe that we all have our individual and collective path towards overview. In my case, I experienced overview when I was a kid, laying down in the grass in the summer, watching the Milky Way at night. And then I decided I want to become an astronomer. I want to go and explore space. And I think we should keep this dimension. Then everybody has a path to experience this. So we have to preserve our dark skies, get our kids to see the cosmos, because that step one of space is astronomy, observing the sun, the moon, and showing our connection. Step two is learning a bit more, that we actually our world, our life come from space. And I really very much enjoyed how Sarah rediscovered this, because when you, as a kid, when you study astronomy, you realize, yes, Earth is part of space and all the ingredients. We have the Big Bang in us. We have the core of stars in us, the ingredient from life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that what I resonated also is on your topic about, space for all has to include this part, observing our Earth and the space, learning, using data as well, because now our society depends more and more on space data. So this knowledge we have to share with everybody, that they can really benefit from it. And then towards migration, I like also very much your view that, I come from France, and we say liberté, égalité, fraternité, but I think we have to add two other terms. We should add creativity and responsibility. And it's true that now we have also to engage. And these are some of the concepts that when we worked on the Moon Village, we have to use this opportunity to foster to people science, the taste for technology, for innovation, to do the thing in peace as well. You mentioned ISS for peace. We have to work, and we are talking about space for peace, but also space for education, space for jobs. And so how can we put a plan of action where this human expansion in space can really serve all citizens of Earth? So that's are some of my comments you can answer, but I have also a specific question. I am a bit doubtful about the weight that we give to the Club de Rome. They have a kind of possibly a Malthusian method. And now we know that the world population is going to peak anyway at about 10 billion, just by the normal evolution of, possibly the various societies that get educated, women control birth, and so on. So we are not going to have an overpopulation problem. The big problem that we have on Earth is the very bad distribution of benefit of progress to the world population.
Mhm.
So how can we use the expansion into space, not just for an overflow of a few million of people, will not change overpopulation, but getting better opportunities for spreading the benefit of technology to the earth, the knowledge, the technology, inspiring creative people all over the world, and helping people to realize themselves and realize their collective goals. So how can we really use human expression through space to serve Earth and ourselves to
Yeah,
have a fairer society, more inclusive, and where we benefit all?
yeah. That is a very significant question without an easy answer. I believe that most people my age who got into the space movement in the 70s, the main reason we got into it was not because we liked tinkering with rockets. You know, it was not because we were engineers. What we saw it as being was a fresh start for humanity, where we could, in fact, look at the mistakes we've made, like the inequities of Earth, and we could resolve to change, make a change. And I think that philosophy permeates the human space program, Space Renaissance International, the National Space Society. I think there's a strong feeling that just leaving the planet is not enough. And the only solution I see is to be aware of these concerns and to do something about it. Like, for example, you might know Loretta Whitesides, who's created the Spacekind program.
Yeah, very good friend. We met
Yeah.
at the foundation of Space Generation in 1999 in Unispace Suisse in Vienna, Loretta. Also, Joris Knight, yes.
Well, I think Spacekind has about 500 graduates now. I'm a graduate. And it's all about improving yourself and your consciousness with space as the context. And I think Loretta's making a huge contribution. She wants to create Jedi to guard the solar ecosystem. Cyan Proctor also talks about Jedi space, just, equitable, and diverse and inclusive space, and working toward that end. You know, the human space program, our motto is sustainable, ethical, and inclusive. And Michelle Hanlon has created the Institute for Space Law and Ethics. And, you know, what I'm saying is that the answer to your question is, first of all, we have to say space for everyone, nobody left behind. We can't fall into this trap of it becoming a gated community and leaving everybody else on Earth who doesn't have the money to go.
Elysium. Elysium.
Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking the same. Mhm.
Yeah, Rick Tomlinson calls it the Elysium effect. The film Elysium does depict exactly that, where the wealthy and the privileged are living on what looks like an O'Neill community. If that's the way it turns out, I think we will have failed, actually. So I just think we have to keep bringing it up and keep insisting on a new, as was said in my introduction, a new philosophy of space exploration.
But that leads to a practical question, which is how many beyond the Earth's surface, and we are starting to have a multiplanetary civilization. So I remember 20 years ago, I proposed the idea of a Noah's Ark, you know, to to preserve the biosphere and humans. And they asked me, how many humans do we have there? And I had the same quotation that you have, that in our ancestry, we have some 1,300 ancestors from our genes. So the minimum we need is to preserve this genome, but we will need more than that to preserve, okay, the diversity of skills, of history, but to function as a full-scale society, to bring really all the benefit back to Earth. What is your estimate of how many we need to be? And also, if we develop the proper technology to have a lower cost of access to space, like now we have the cost to access to aviation. So can we consider that we'll be able to bring millions to the moon or in orbit? So
Yeah,
what is your evolution of number of humans that you see in orbit on the moon?
Well, if your goal is the preservation of the species, you know, I think there have been some studies I've heard about what's the bare minimum number of people to begin that process. And the number I've heard is 500. That, you know,
and also in any case, we have also genetic techniques now when you can preserve the DNA, and you can have some also for all the other species that we want to preserve. The whales, we are not going to bring so many whales, but we will have a laboratory where we preserve their genes. But okay, 500, so that's really the bare minimum for the Noah's Ark. But for a well-functioning society that will be working in synergy with those that are on Earth, we need more.
On the other hand, you know, if you're interested in overshoot, and if you do think that overshoot is a problem, then I think you have to look at billions of people. And so I think there's a minimum.
But why billion? Because on Earth, we are not going to go over 10 billion.
But that's too many.
No, but we need to manage better resources to spread. For instance, production of food, we could be 40 times more efficient using new technologies.
We should do that too. I mean, we should certainly work on that. But, you know, again, if you look at the information that's out there, no matter what we do, we ought to look at a reduced population. That's my theory. I know there are people that don't agree, but, you know, my plan is large-scale space migration. Your plan is better distribution among the population on
10
Earth.
billion that we will be, at least in the next century.
Yeah.
And,
anyway,
and avoid wars, also avoid the waste of life and energy. Okay, but okay, you have to take all this input, the diversity of this input, and we see just how we can build some of these paths to the future.
And just putting the plug in for the simulation model, Bernard, instead of us having this conversation, once this model is really functioning, we could simulate, you know, 10 billion people on Earth with better distribution versus billion people on Earth and 5 billion in outer space.
Yes, it's important to put how you educate them, because that's the key. That's the key.
I think I have to say something.
I have one question in the chat still left. May I take this?
Thank you, Frank.
There are many questions in the chat, but I would take one for Frank from Mikhail Baskov. Should we play the civilization killer asteroid card more actively to attract attention? Not predicted hits this century, but some unknown asteroids can hit us anytime.
Yeah, and what is the question? Is it
the question is, should we play the civilization killer asteroid card more actively to attract attention?
I think, you know, I think we ought to talk about it more. And I know that there is a lot of interest in planetary defense right now, and that's appropriate because there are a lot of near-Earth objects that we're not detecting. And, you know, if you go back and look at what happened when that asteroid hit that really pretty much wiped out the dinosaurs,
Mm.
that was an explosion. That was amazing. And they depict that in this series that I talked about of life on our planet. I really urge people to watch that because it's an eye-opener.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we have
Yes.
external
And
threat, but we have also internal threat. I see that the biggest danger comes from ourselves, from
Yeah.
yeah,
how unstable our behavior is, how we have wars, how we have, for instance, AI threat, how we have things that we have also to work very much on ourselves and defend ourselves from space.
and
Well said.
and here's
Yeah,
another
okay.
question for you.
So,
What was your involvement with the National Commission on Space?
The National Commission on Space from the past? Or
The question is, what was Frank's involvement with the National Commission on Space?
well, I'll answer that in two ways. One is I'm working with some colleagues to create a new National Commission on Space. I think we should have a new one. There was one in the 80s that was formed by President Reagan, and I was pretty involved in helping to write their report. And I was working with one of the commissioners to help kind of structure the final report. So I was very involved in that. And that particular commission is discussed at some length in my book.
Yeah, he's writing 1986, yeah, and
Yeah, I
new
was very
one, yeah.
involved.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yes.
was very involved with that, and it's in my book. I don't want to leave without Adriano. I don't think we have
Yes.
much time. Adriano, go ahead.
Okay, Adriano, it's your turn.
yes, no, I would. Of course, my comments is always try to be general and to focus on what I think it should be the main point. Well, as always, when I see a presentation by Frank, it's very difficult for me to find points where I don't agree, because
Yeah, we do agree on
it
that.
seems that Frank and myself are really on the same frequency, and we share the main concepts definitely. So he touched several interesting points. The sapiens is one of the species on Earth, and as many species were extinct during the history so far, so we cannot think that it could never happen to us. This is a very important point, because there is a sort of fatalism, no, that history cannot end, and we have all our culture before us and so on, and therefore this thing cannot end and so on. No, it's not true. It can end due to exo-Earth causes, or by internal to
Right.
Earth causes and so on. So yes, Earth is the best planet, of course. It's the only one we know so far that allow life and human life in a, let me say, in a natural way, just to use an abused word, but in this case I think is appropriate, because we have air to breathe, we have water to drink, we have the right temperature and everything. Yes, now we have the climate change, and we don't know if it is mainly for natural causes or if we are helping warming with our activities. It could be, and that is not a good thing. And then he mentioned limits to growth, something that the space community had to polemize from the very beginning, from Kraft-Erike. During the 70s, Kraft-Erike began to polemize with Augusto Pecce and the Club of Rome, because the vision of the Club of Rome was a closed Earth vision. They didn't never mention, and even in the new issues of this analysis, they never mention space as an opportunity, as an alternative. So this is a very, very bad thing that we have to keep on remarking, because it's really to be is really a choice to be blind.
Yeah.
To consider that Earth is closed, a closed system and cannot be open. So why? Okay, so I come to the what I think is now the real question for us. So is it environmentalism versus space? Of course not, but it's not us that are putting this contradiction.
I know.
Are the environmentalists that exclude space because space is wasting, space is technology, and they don't like technology. They prefer to go on the ocean by sailing, not by motor, because motor is polluting, and all these kind of things. So it's not our guilty if these things are contraposed.
I agree.
The real question is, which are our means as space community to enter the discussion, the public discussion, really? Because we are not in the public discussion yet. And we are on the edge of having the shin stalled another way. During the last decades, we had, firstly, internet that was a revolution and was very good for us too, because we get profit of internet. You and me, Frank, we couldn't talk together if we don't have internet.
No.
We cannot do this kind of thing if we don't have the web, of course. But it was also a revolution that in some way stole, they catched the shin to space. Revolution in the 90s. No? Then we had, now we have artificial intelligence. It's another great opportunity, great danger also from another point of view, but is also an argument that is taking the discussion, the public discussion. Everyone is talking about artificial intelligence. In these days, the founder, Bill Gates, came to Italy, and what he was talking about, artificial intelligence, with our prime minister and so on. Jeff Bezos also came to Italy in these days, and he also is talking about, not about space, no, about artificial intelligence. Elon Musk came to Italy 1 month ago, more or less, and what he was talking about, artificial intelligence. So even our champions, let's say, they don't talk about the space revolution. They talk about artificial intelligence. So, but now we are on the edge of another big distractor. That's war. People is not concerned about the alternative between using space for Earth or expanding into space. They are not aware of this discussion. This is only inside our community.
Right.
Now, the real contradiction is the concern for Earth environment, for this kind of things that were in the center of discussion up to a couple of years ago, before COVID, no? And the war. Now there is stupid war rising everywhere in the Red Sea, in Pakistan, and everything was triggered by the horrible Hamas action in Israel. And now there are 25,000 people already killed in Gaza, and Israel government is still against the solution of two states, independent states, and they want to keep on killing people, and nobody understands what this thing can help a solution over there. But however, okay, I didn't want to talk about the Palestinian problem now, but about war. We could be confronted. Yeah. So where are our efforts, our big efforts?
Well,
targeted now. We are spending 2 trillion a year in weapons. Okay, and this is going to, I read some analysis also from the Davos, there was a Davos conference about the global economy and so on. And the idea is that the expense on weapons will rise. So we will reach maybe 2.5 trillion per year, maybe 3 trillion per year. So what we are talking about?
Yeah.
With those money, we could build 5 on-air infrastructures in the Lagrange points.
Yes, you're right.
We could make a lot of things for climate change, for the Earth, for space for all, for the things that Bernard said that are of course all good things to be done on Earth, and they are not bad things, of course.
They could stop hunger in the world.
So the real question is, which means do we have as a space community to enter the discussion and to make people get aware that space is an alternative, is a factor of sustainability, and we should concentrate our efforts on that direction and not about on killing each other. How can we do it? I think that the 18 SDG is a proposal that can help breaking the wall and going to talk to the people. But we have to find the supporters for that. We have to find somebody that puts some money in that. Otherwise, what can we do? Always discussing, preaching to the choir, yes, among ourselves. So here's my question. What can we do? Sorry, I know it's a difficult question.
I think if he has an answer to this question, you would get the Nobel Prize too.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Well,
yeah.
I know that we're at the end of the time, but I would say that the reason Human Space Program is supporting the 18th SDG is to create a forum where we can bring space into the mainstream discussion. I think it's a great opportunity, and I think we've, made a lot of progress thanks to what SRI has done. The other thing I would say is that, we have a project at Human Space Program, and we're working with Moon Village on this, and would certainly invite you to be part of it. We're calling it Making Space for the Environment. And our methodology is going to be to bring what I call earthbound environmentalists together with us spacebound environmentalists and have a dialogue. I mean, the only solution to that problem is dialogue. And I think that's what we have to do. Beyond that, I think I actually have developed a plan B, which is plan A on our part is to bring the overview effect down to Earth. This consciousness that the astronauts have, the cosmonauts have, it isn't widespread because not many people have had the experience. So doing everything we can to bring that down to Earth. But a secondary goal is to prevent this mentality from spilling out into the solar system. It's going to be really, really easy to extend the war-making mentality beyond the Earth. But I think we're going to have to work very, very hard just to contain it, because I've already seen articles about how different countries are looking at the space environment as the high ground, and that, they need to be there, not, not to help the Earth and not to inspire people and all of that, but to win wars. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have really no choice but to do it. But it comes down to being communications, Adriana, which I think you're very good at that. I think Space Renaissance is doing their part, and we need to break out of our bubble, as you pointed out. And so I support you on that, and I know you're trying to do that.
Yeah.
So we have a plan of action of Space Renaissance with different activities, events, debate, publication, but also engaging some of the workforce, the different stakeholders. And I believe I don't mean to increase the budget of the military if they are sending rocket to the moon to build the moon village. You know, the military funded the Clementine mission.
Yeah.
A great mission for science and technology. So if we use money for that, that's okay, but stop the killing.
Better than
Yeah,
nothing.
but I think it's very, very important what Frank said, that we have to prevent people to bring the war into space. So this is really, really, really very important. And I doubt we will reach this goal because I see that there's no yeah, they're not working together with going to the moon. That it's like competition and
our help is the law is with us. The Outer Space Treaty forbids militarization of space, forbids weapon of mass destruction. So we have to keep this legal base, but I believe also the spirit of space renaissance, which is the space is to foster positive values, you know, knowledge. That this we have also to extend, and we get everybody to be part of the space renaissance.
Yes, this is true. Frank, I
please
thank
subscribe.
you.
Subscribe. I will put the link.
Frank, I thank you so much for your lecture, for being with us, and I hope we can invite you again for another lecture. Thank you, Bernard and Adriano, for joining me here, and thank you to our audience for staying with us all the time and for this interesting discussion, for this lecture. It was really, really an interesting evening, and maybe you have the chance later on to look at the chat and see all the comments, and it was really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to see the chat, and I would do my best to answer some of the questions if I can.
Yes, it's on YouTube. You can look at it. I also would like to remind everyone that we are a non-profit organization, so support us, join us, become member of SRI, or maybe you want to donate something because we are doing our work as volunteers, and yeah, everything helps us. And I would like to invite you for the 5th of February to our next webinar. We will have Alberto Cavallo talking about evolution and state of the art of launch systems. I hope to see you on the 5th of February. Frank, you are also invited to watch our webinar series. And I wish you all a nice evening. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.